that was the general tenor of, Nadia has become bad because she's not obeying Bela Karolyi, and she might have a life, and she's as old as 18, so she might as well just dig a grave. That was generally the idea. That was the tenor of the media coverage after Nadia.
That was an actual headline.
Remember, the show is PG-13, so you might hear a naughty word or two.
This month, TumbleTrack is having a 10% off sale on carpet bonded foam and all their special innovator products. So, did someone walk in heels on your carpet bonded foam? Yeah, did they get a discount on replacement carpet bonded foam and then charge the offending heel wearer? That's what I recommend. Check it all out at TumbleTrack at TUMBLTRAK, tumbletrack.com. Train smart. A history of Olympic judging scandals. We have a little Paris preview, what has changed since the Tokyo Olympics, new rules and format, and some breaking news. It's July 8th, 2024, and welcome to the #1 gymnastics podcast in the galaxy. I'm Jessica. I'm here with Spencer from the Balance Beam Situation. Breaking news, which we broke a long time ago, but we have a video now. Andrade and the Brazilian Olympic Committee have put out a video of part from the upper shooting upwards with no landing, her triple twisting Yurchenko.
It's very exciting.
Ta-da! Now, from the angle of this, we are behind the vault looking up. We can't see her land.
It's smart. That's just cut the video. Just like, I feel like a lot of gymnasts would appreciate if that were just the sport.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it in the air and then cut right before I land.
That's all that counts. To me, it looks like it's super high. It's beautiful. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. It's a triple twisting Yurchenko. It's like, let's celebrate and go nuts because, oh my God, this is so freaking cool. Does it look like she actually is landing this super safely and was doing it like on hard mats? No. Do I think they chose this very specific video to put out publicly? Yes. Do I think if she's going to do it, it's going to be safe? Yes, because she is very cautious about what she does and the risks that she takes. What are your thoughts, Spencer?
Yes, I agree. I think it's very cool. And on the one hand, I'm like, this video would not exist if she weren't confident in this vault, or if it weren't viewing it as a realistic option for performing at the Olympics. She would just be like, I'm playing around with this. It's not for looking. Don't worry about it. So the existence of this video makes me think there is a more realistic chance that we see it at the Olympics. But yeah, like probably if she's landing this, she's like an 1/8 of a twist under, and it maybe isn't worth it compared to the Amanar, but we will see. And it also would depend on how much this is difficulty valued at, which we don't know yet. And it's possible that it could be super undervalued based on its difficulty if they follow precedent. And that would also be very significant for whether it's actually worth performing or not.
Right. Which is, we hope they actually value this the way it should be and bump it up a scale instead of just following the scale, because the scale does not reflect the insanity of this vault and how excited we are to see it. So congratulations to Andrade and the whole country of Brazil. I'm so excited about this.
It's a good moment. It's a great moment for the nation.
It's a great moment for the nation and the nation of gymnastics as a whole.
Yes.
It is. So, let's discuss the judging scandals.
My favorite topic of all time. Yeah.
Your opus, your magnum opus, what you've been...
My life's work. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think that we are, very close to the Olympics at this point, and gymnastics as a sport, I think we're well aware of our role in the wider Olympic ecosystem, which is to have a weird judging scandal, one that normies can have very strong and very uninformed opinions about based on what NBC told them, and then can talk about it for a while and then immediately forget about it. And then we spend the next 4 years talking about it and being like, well, actually what happened is it, and then it doesn't matter because no one cares or is listening. So that's why it's time to count down, or at least go through, because I haven't ranked these, the biggest Olympic gymnastics judging scandals in history. beginning with the most significant, I would say, the year 2004, aka the year the men lost their minds and then everything changed.
Mm-hmm. The case of the ill-given gold. What's the tea, you ask? The biggest judging scandal in Olympic history because the results were objectively incorrect, no matter of opinion about who had better execution, period, end of story. The result was wrong. Take us back, Spencer.
Okay, so what happened in the men's all-around final is that the correct gold medalist would have been Yang Tae-Young of South Korea. Instead, the actual possession of the medals in history will tell us that Paul Ham of the United States is the 2004 Olympic all-around champion. So basically what happened was a judging error for Yang Tae-Young on his parallel bars routine that resulted in the wrong score. What happened is Yang performed a bell, which is a long swing into release, double back, catch on your arms. The judges credited instead a morasue, which is the same thing but without the long swing going into it. So in 2004, that resulted in an incorrect start value. A start value they gave that was 9-9 because they thought it was a morasue. Should have been a 10 because it was a bell. That 1/10 would have been enough, if evaluated correctly, to put Yang into the gold medal position, Paul Ham into the silver medal position. So this kind of thing happens. Start values, now D scores, are wrong sometimes, and there is an inquiry mechanism. Typically what would happen is then the South Korean coaches would say, that start value is wrong. We're going to submit an inquiry immediately. That gets changed. For whatever reason, this inquiry was not submitted technically in a sufficiently timely fashion to follow the FIG rules. So the competition ends, Paul Ham wins, he is the Olympic gold medalist, and then South Korea's like, actually, you did it wrong. And the FIG says, too late, basically. You were supposed to file this inquiry officially and not just like talk to the judges about how they did it wrong, which I think is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
They went to the judges and said, you did it wrong. And the judges were like, we didn't do it wrong. And then they were like, you did it wrong. And they were like, we did do it wrong. But nothing was officially filed until after the competition. So the result sort of stood, except it was obviously wrong. And the FIG had to acknowledge that this is obviously wrong. And we did it wrong. And we gave the gold medal to the wrong person.
I just remember watching Yang and being like, he's so good. He's so amazing. He's totally going to win. Like, this is definitely going to happen. Like, I was so excited and I was like, oh, this is going to be, South Korea's first gold medal and all around. This is incredible. And it's such a big thing. And I just remember watching and even the NBC commentators being like, oh, this isn't good. This isn't good. And at the time noticing, and this is also the same time when Paul Ham fell on vault.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in those days, it was still the days of you couldn't fall and also win. At least that the perception was you couldn't fall and win. Mm-hmm. So I remember people being like, this is wrong. If you should not be able to win with a fall. And yet Paul Ham did. And I think what was worse about this whole thing was how Bruno Grande handled it afterwards.
Mm-hmm. The letter
and the press conference. Bruno Grande was the president of FIG at the time. And there's a press conference and they asked him, what do you think Paul Ham should do? And he mimicked taking a medal off and giving it. He didn't say anything, but he mimed it. And it's like, well, that's your job, dude. You're in charge of the judges. If you think that's right, you should have been like, you know what? We actually have the power to correct a wrong, even though it wasn't done in the exact time frame. The judges were wrong. There's a mechanism for this. It's built in. We just didn't do the time. The timing wasn't right. He made everything worse.
Right. Because it was sort of then very much put on Paul Ham as though he's the one who was supposed to rectify the situation, which it's like, this happens sometimes. It's happening now where like people make mistakes and athletes benefit from them. It's not their responsibility to be the arbiter of peace in that situation. They're just like, all right, well, this is what happened. I benefited from a weird thing. Yeah, it was handled horribly, obviously, by everybody. South Korea eventually took it all the way to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which upheld the result that of what happened, because the FIG did follow their own rules, basically, is why. They said, oh, you filed the protest too late after the end of the competition, and that's not in the rules, so we can't change it, which is correct. That was the rule. So the Court of Arbitration for Sport had to say, like, actually, they did what they did, even though it wasn't like right or good, they did what their rules said. They followed the rules, so there's not really anything we can do about that.
Yeah.
But I would definitely the biggest scandal, because it's the all-around final of the Olympics, kind of a big deal, and there's not really a back and forth. Like if it's Shannon Miller and Tatiana Gutsu 1992 all-around gold, we can argue till we're blue in the face about who had the better competition and who should win. But there's a case on both sides, and it's kind of subjective execution arguments. This is objective skill performed arguments.
Yep. This is objectively the wrong person got the gold medal, provable evidence given. It was just, this is why I am always impressed when coaches and the gymnasts already have their petitions ready, because if you're last and you rotate next, I mean, you might have like 30 seconds to get or 60 seconds to actually get your protest in to inquire. And so you have to have like your routine already written down, already ready to go, and like run to hand it to someone. So just everybody's getting ready, already have everything filled out.
Yeah.
Oh
my God, be ready to protest.
And always be wearing shoes you can run in. That is the most.
And have someone assigned who is in charge of the protests.
Yes. Like your job is run.
Your job is to be argumentative, because there are definitely people who are great at that job.
And know who you're supposed to give it to. Because, like, on the one hand, you could just run to the judges, but I think it has to go to the actual head table. So, like, or also, if you don't know, just run waving it in the air so that they don't stop the timer. That's the other thing I would do.
Oh, this is another thing. If Jessica were in charge of the rules, you would have like little like air horns at each event that you would have to like press if you were protesting a score, like within a certain, and like confetti like would pop out, and it would be like, there's been a protest, and we would all know about it. Yeah,
that's exactly what should happen. And then there a light should shine, like a laser beam that shows you the path to go to deliver your piece of paper, so that you can see someone running down and they know where to go. Oh, this would be great if only I was in charge.
Yeah.
Next, the case of the bogus bronze. What's the tea, you ask? Marian Drăgulescu of Romania, important, received an impossible score for a fall on his second vault in the vault final, resulting in the bronze medal over Kyle Shewfelt of Canada in fourth.
Yeah, you thought after the all-around final that they had gotten all of the insane judging scandals out of their system, but the men's judges in 2004 were like, no, we're just getting started. So the men's vault final was ridiculous. You had Alexei Bondarenko getting injured right at the very beginning. You had all sorts of nonsense in the scores, including, last up, Marian Drăgulescu, who starts his first vault is the Drăgulescu, his eponymous vault, handspring, double front, half turn. He does it maybe the best anyone has ever done it for his first vault. Stuck landing, scores a 9-9, which was way higher than any other vault in the final. So it's basically, I think, a solid recognition. Like, this vault was amazing. He's definitely in the power position for a gold medal. Then he goes for his second vault, Kazumatsu 1.5, which we see many, many people performing. Like, if you watched the men's Olympic trials this series, you saw many, many Kazumatsu 1.5s. He lands it under rotated, big lunge to the side, hands down, one hand pretty solid support on the ground, the other hand also makes contact. A fall for a vault that had a start value of 9.9. He receives a 9.325 for this vault, including 2 9.5s and a 9.45, despite, once again, falling.
Which
So
at that time, it was a half a point for a fall.
So you're saying very clearly these 9.5s and these 9.45s, if you're saying this is a fall, which it was, those are impossible scores for a fall on this vault. The argument, I would say, the most charitable you can possibly be to the judges in the moment judging this vault is that he takes that big crossover step lunge to the side. He's off the mat. He's off to one side. The hands down happen very much off to one side of the vault. You could make the argument that the judges on the opposite side would have had an obstructed view of the hand down. It's behind the mat. His body is there. You could say that. But if that's the case, that is why being out of range exists.
Mm-hmm.
There is a concept where if judges are too far out of range, they have to fix it. And in this case, the scores for this vault ranged from 9-0, a pretty reasonable, I think a pretty accurate score for this vault under the code, to a 9.5 that is out of range and should have been resolved, which is, I think, the biggest offense here, rather than you misjudged a routine. It's that you were supposed to be out of range, and you were out of range, and you were supposed to fix that.
What I remember about this is that there being so much outrage and just like no one did any, like there was nothing to be done. Nothing could, it was just like, that's it. But I do remember that people were super upset. So this is what I remember watching this, because we do have an interview with Marian Drăgulescu about this, and we do have an interview with Kyle Shewfelt about this, and I will link them in the show notes. But I remember people being like, oh, the fix is in because Adrian Stoica, Romanian, is the men's technical committee head. And Adrian Stoica is Romanian, just like Drăgulescu is Romanian. And so they were just making a fix so that he would get this, he would get a medal, basically, despite the fact that he fell. And that is why Canada appealed, but it was denied. And who was in charge of denying it? Adrian Stoica, who was in charge and was also Romanian. So that conspiracy theory has never gone away. And I mean, it is another time when it is objectively the wrong person got a medal. Period. End of story.
It's another case where I also feel like the proof is in the punishment, because you had four of the judges on this vault final got suspended, which if they had done everything right, no one's getting suspended.
Yep. And also, like, they got suspended, but Kyle Shewfelt didn't get a medal. Like, if you have to suspend the judges afterwards, shouldn't you also have to at least give an extra medal? If you're not going to take Drăgulescu's away, because it's not his fault that the judges, it's his fault he fell over, but it's not his fault that the judges gave the wrong score. But like, have an extra medal made and give it to Kyle Shewfelt. It's not too late, FIG. Make it right.
Good point. Make it right.
Yeah. And who really deserves a medal? Kyle Shewfelt also will be commentating on the Olympics this year. So another great, great commentator who is energy and insight that we love. The case of the sexy stoppage. What's the tea? Alexei Nemov performs the high bar in 2004 event final and receives only a 9.725. The crowd had other thoughts about this.
They did not like that sexy Alexei had a low landing and a lunge forward on his double twisting, double layout high bar routine, because they thought it should be a 10 because of Alexei Nemov. And also, it is a beautiful routine on the high bar.
So
the amplitude, the extension, the execution, like the current high bars could never, is what I'm going to say.
Could never. You talk to men now in gymnastics, who is your icon? Alexei Nemov. Beautiful gymnastics. And also, we didn't nickname him Sexy Alexei. The gymnastics world.
The world did. And we have no control over it. So we just have to go with it. We have to call him Sexy Alexei. It's the only thing you can do.
I know. We're just letting you know who it is. I mean, otherwise, how would you know? Yeah. Also, otherwise, like, I mean, it might also have had something to do with why he was so popular with the crowd. Like, he was perfect in his gymnastics, but also not hideous to look at. And so I think maybe that helped his case. But it was a beautiful routine, minus the landing.
Yes. Okay, I have an issue with kind of how this is talked about as a controversy, because the idea that the crowd was so rowdy and so protesty about this 9725 that put him out of the medals, because it was shockingly low to have a 9725 out of 10 in 2004. The idea that they stopped the final is not a thing, because the crowd cannot stop a final. The judges have control over that. They could have just said, okay, Paul Hamm, it's time for you to go. Here's the flag, you go. And Paul Hamm would have competed. There probably would have been more noise. Gymnasts are very used to that. That's not like distracted by the crowd is not a thing.
They're not like golfers, you mean?
They're not like golfers. Many gymnasts prefer noise and other things going on because then they feel like not every single eye is on them when they're doing their routine. So that's not really a thing, but they didn't let Paul Hamm go. They waited and waited, and then we had the two lowest judges alter their scores, even though the start value was a 10 and they were all within a 2/10 range. So you put in your score and that's the score. But suddenly the two lowest judges are raising their scores. He only went up to 9762 instead of 9725, so it didn't change the placement. But that was another thing of why are these scores being changed? Why are we reacting to this situation when you could have just been like, all right, the score went in, the crowd didn't like it because they love Alexei Nemov and his routine is beautiful, but he, had a large error on his dismount. Okay, next.
And the other thing about this is like, this is one of my favorite things because the crowd protesting like for something they loved and being upset with the scores is so great. This is kind of engagement you want from gymnastics fans. But the thing is, like, the whole stoppage thing, I mean, it went on for so long that without the judges just saying, okay, green light, let's go, that Alexei Nemov actually went up on the podium and like waved to the crowd and was like, thank you so much, I appreciate it, but like, let's let Paul Hamm compete now. Like, he helped try to relax everyone. Thank you so much. Let's move on. But the fact
Thank you so much. I know how good looking I am. Yes.
I know. You're welcome for my presence
You're welcome
here.
for me. Yeah.
Yes. I am spectacular. But I like, what did they think the crowd was going to do? The judges, were they going to jump over that giant railing? It was like, 20 feet jump from where the first seat was in that arena. It was like a high bar. It was, I know, that's the thing. Like, this isn't England at a soccer match. Like, they're gymnastics fans. Like, everyone calm down. It was an international crowd that loved Alexei Nemov. Like, it wasn't, I mean, what's the worst things gymnastics fans have ever done? That all happens online. It never happens in person.
I was like, have you seen the internet?
It's all anonymous on the internet. I think that I don't know. Had there been riotous Greek crowds in the past that they were afraid of, it's very upsetting. But it's my favorite thing that's happened because the crowd was so passionate. I love a passionate crowd. I love a slow clap. I love demonstrative moments like this. And it's great for, Alexei Nemov because everybody wants that kind of adulation as an athlete.
So we've talked about all of these scandals of judging from 2004. Would you like to talk about what happened then as a result of this really great Olympics for judging? Just a real high point for the sport?
We have the Tennessee tipping point in college gymnastics, and we have 2004 Athens Games in elite gymnastics. And that is when there had been discussion for a long time about how the gymnastics scoring needed to be changed to make it more objective and to prevent situations like what happened in 2004 from happening. Those were just judging errors. They were just the wrong judging. Not the case of the Sexy Stoppage, but they were just errors. They didn't. But this was a perception was now we're just seen as a banana republic of a sport, and it's anarchy and it's all corruption. And so now we actually have to stop just talking about changing the scores and really change the scoring system. So that is when we finally got the open-ended scoring system where we had D scores and E scores, difficulty and execution separated to make one big score, how we got 16s finally. And
finally, like what everyone
16s.
had been calling for is we want the scores to be 16.
Just give me a 16. And we were promised that this was going to be, there was going to be a record holder every year, like they have a world record holder, like they have in the racing sports. The world record for vault score is a 16.4. But of course, the code changes every 4 years and then it's constantly adjusted. So we never really got that. We just have to keep up with it as each season goes, as each year goes. And things changed. And then we also got the big fat deduction eventually for falling instead of a half a point, a whole point. And so it's all thanks to the men in 2004, once again, for being a mess that we have. I like this scoring. I think the scoring is more exciting. Is the loss of the 10 a huge loss? Yes. The 10 is iconic, but you can still get a 10. You could still get a 10 in execution. Is it actually possible? No. There's no way.
Simone could go to the Paris Olympics and stick her Yurchenko double pike perfectly. She would not get a 10 in execution.
No, because you get 3 tenths off for breathing. But theoretically, the 10 still exists. Now, is there ever been any skill? The person that got closest to it was Danusha Francis at the Tokyo Games, doing a bar routine that was 3 skills.
Yeah.
She got the highest E score of the whole meet. Wasn't it like a 9.8 or 9.9? Yeah, the whole Olympics. So. Yeah. So that's what we've learned from the new code is don't do gymnastics. The less is more, which is the unfortunate thing about the way the new scoring system. But thanks to the men's judging for being a mess, we have a new system.
Do you think it's significant that after all the years of just obvious corruption in women's gymnastics, it took something happening publicly for men to make a change?
Yeah, obviously. Obviously, this is what happened. And the documented corruption, the parties where scores were negotiated, all of that. Yeah, it's, of course, it was only when it happened to the men that it became real and became an issue. You know, women can suffer for years. There's not even research put into it. But once it happens to a man, everyone believes it's real and we have to change the perception. No one can relate to that.
I love hitting those lobs up for you to talk about sexism. My favorite thing.
We work so well together.
Serving up a softball there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to also, while we're on 2004, I want to mention another scandal that's been happening for years. And I did not know about this until this week when Ivan told me about it. The Chéng, which is spelled Chéng, Cheng, and most people pronounce it that way, the vault. The Chéng is pronounced Chung, not because it was translated wrong. It's because we have been spelling it wrong in English this whole time. The E has an accent over it, which tells you to make the sound from the Chinese translation. It's supposed to have an accent over it. It's not just an E. It's like when they couldn't afford to put Karina Munoz's Enya in her name. So it was spelled wrong in the NCAA.
Yeah,
we are just as bad, you guys. It's humiliating for all English spellers. So from now on, make sure you put the accent above the E. I don't know which direction it goes. I'll have to look that up. But I'll put it in the show notes.
Some willy-nilly accents.
You don't put the wrong one in there.
Just going to put accents, all of them, from every language on every word.
And I'll describe it and it'll be the wrong one because I don't know what that one's called. Like there's a tilde and a boobity boob. It's this. It goes.
Like your second example for a diacritic would be a boobity boob.
Exactly. It's the one that points towards the end of the word. It points toward the G, whatever that one's called.
Okay.
The diacritic. Thank you for teaching me a word. So back to judging. Now that we've fixed that scandal, the scandal is our spelling.
The scandal was us all along.
All along.
I think that's what we've learned. Okay. My question about this. So we change 2004. We change the system, open-ended scoring, D score, E score. Well, A scores and B scores for a while, and then D score, E score. Did that do anything? Did that fix corruption, prominent judging mistakes, and scandals?
No.
Do you think, because I feel like there are fewer now.
There are fewer, but also there was a regime change. That is the other difference that happened. So do I think there's still things that happen? Yes. Were there still definitely problems with scoring? Yes. But is it as bad as it used to be? No. And I think the whole FIG, there are many, not everyone, but there are many, many new people brought in to run the various technical committees and stuff like that. Like that has, I think, had an effect.
My contention, possible theory, is that it's much harder to tell now if someone has scored a routine incorrectly than it used to be. Especially, you have no way of knowing if someone is fiddling with the E score because there are so many deductions in the routine anyway, and there are no receipts for it. So it's very difficult to tell if someone is expressing bias in an E score versus just there are so many deductions and everyone's taking them. Who knows if we're all taking the same deductions or not?
Yep. We do have an interview coming up with Hugh Mercier, who created the judging evaluation system. So look forward to that coming up. Yeah.
But I do think in general we've had fewer.
It's better.
Since 2004, I think we've had fewer judging scandals. We have plenty of things to argue about, but fewer obvious mistakes and more cases where the rules were applied correctly. They're just dumb, like in tie breaks, which we will get to.
Yep.
But I think that's tends to be more the controversy now is like, wait, the rule is what and why and don't.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Which brings us to, the next.
The case of the accused Australian. What's the tea? Nastia He Kexin tied in the 2008 bars final. But why would I be second?
My favorite gif of Nastia is her turning to Valeri and being like, but why would I be second?
Why am I second?
I am Nastia Lukin. I'm
not second.
I am no one's sloppy seconds. I take second to nobody. I am Nastia Lukin. So famously, the 2008 Olympic uneven bars final, Nastia Lukin and He Kexin tie. They tie on difficulty score. They tie on execution score. They are tied overall. In Jessica's world, that is, okay, the competition is done. We have 2 gold medalists. Get up on the medal stand. Let's play 2 anthems, and then we're done. What's the problem? Perfection. In reality, we had a tiebreak. And the tiebreak was of the counting judges, because we dropped the high and the low anyway, of the counting judges' scores, then the lowest one is dropped. And then we see who's winning. And who's winning in that case was He Kexin. She becomes the gold medalist, Nastia Lukin, the silver medalist. The thing is that if you are an American and you're watching the Olympics, you're like, well, obviously, there has been some mistake because we do not finish second. We finish first. So we need to find someone to blame, preferably a foreigner. And so it's difficult to blame the rules because they were the rules and that was written beforehand, even though the real culprit here is like kind of a dumb tiebreak rule. Yeah. So they were like, that doesn't sell. So what judge gave He Kexin higher score than Nastia? So they found the Australian judge and they were like, oh, we're in heaven. The Australians have it out for the Americans and they have corruption to the Olympics.
This was, the thing is that I never remembered this happening, that they were blaming the Australian judge.
Okay, so we didn't get coverage of this that much in the US, but they covered it in Australia. And so like There's definitely. Did you watch the Australian news report about
No,
it?
tell me.
Because it's
everything.
great. Oh, it's great. They
like full investigative
interview Liz Chetkovich. They're like, you know who's awful? Americans. And then we're watching it. And we're being like, yeah, I mean, you're correct.
It's true.
But basically, like, you know, this was still the days when like Bela was part of the NBC coverage, and like, surprise, surprise, the interview is like a Bela interview on Access Hollywood where he's like, the Australian judge is biased in favor of the Chinese, and we're doing a whole thing. The reality is, her score was kind of right in the middle of the judges for Nastia. Like, it was right on track. She went 0.3 higher for her Kexin, which was also dropped as the high, so did not affect the scores. If you're judging and giving 0.3 higher to Kexin, you have a case. And there are deductions too in that routine. My opinion is that I thought Yang Yilin had better execution than both of them, and the real scandal is that Yang Yilin was not the gold medalist, because I like a contrary opinion. But yeah, I mean, I'm never going to be like, Nastia's routine should have gotten a higher execution score, because I've seen her dismount.
Right.
Even though it was a good version of it in the event.
It was good. It was
like
for
one
her,
of the best ones. Yeah.
And
she nailed that routine. She came back. It was a very strong routine. But like, you know, form in the air, leg separations, feet, there's so much you can do with that dismount.
Right. It's like a full crisscross applesauce, but outside like death nugget of a dismount. Shout out to her for upgrading and going for that and doing it.
She needed to.
Because she needed to, and she won the all around with it. But yeah, like, obviously that dismount should never win over anything else. But the real controversy, which is not as documented, is if you talk to anyone who was part of the US delegation during that whole thing, they will say that what actually happened was that Nastia would have won outright, but the Chinese had spies at the US camp.
Yeah.
And in the form of other coaches, and the spies were reporting back about what Nastia's whole routine was, and He Kexin upgraded because the spies told her she was going to lose because she didn't have the same difficulty as Nastia, and so she upgraded. That's the real American conspiracy story, minus the Australian judge.
Mm-hmm.
So
because all of the difficult E-level pirouettes are named after Americans and not Chinese gymnasts.
Everybody knows.
Everybody knows that.
All of
none of them could possibly be named after Chinese gymnasts who were also, you know, aware of these skills.
Right. It's almost like they invented how to do bars in China at this difficulty level with the pirouettes. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's definitely what happened. It was spies and not that
and not quality of gymnastics, because you can't acknowledge that someone else was actually great. They had to have been cheating.
Oh, exactly. Spencer, how dare you? Obviously, it always comes down to cheating.
They had to be actually secretly 14 years old, secretly spying. It's all cheating.
Right.
Yeah.
All the
only
nonsense.
Explanation is cheating.
Yes. Next up, the case of the Diabolical Dismount. The 2012 London team final, Kohei's pommel horse dismount for Japan. Final routine, botched his dismount. We watched it 1,000 times in slow motion.
So did the review panel. Watched it 40,000 times. So we're ending the men's team final. Kohei Uchimura for Japan is going on pommel horse. Dismount is great. Everything's going great. He's Koheiing up a storm. He goes up for his dismount, and it turns into a wild flail of body parts. He invented new limbs just so they could go in strange directions during this dismount. He just kind of flails off the end of the horse, somehow landing on his feet. That's still a miracle. That he...
Okay, you accidentally said flares off the whore and then corrected yourself. Anyway, I'm going to make that into a little audio clip. Flails off the whore.
Well, you got to get off of there. It's illegal. So he originally did not get dismount credit, which meant that the score comes up. Japanese team is in 4th place. China wins. Great Britain 2nd. Ukraine has the bronze medal, and Japan is 4th. Japan then, in a timely fashion, lodges an inquiry, which helped the controversy and is my favorite part of this controversy because you do have to submit a payment to lodge an inquiry. This exists ostensibly to prevent people from just inquiring about every single routine and slowing the meet, that there's like a financial penalty for doing that, and not because anyone just wants to line their pockets. That would never happen. Ultimately, it's not a great look for gymnastics to have just a wad of cash clipped to a piece of paper that you're then handing to the judges. And a reasonable person would look at that and say, that's what bribes look like. So then gymnastics was like, okay, we got to make it look less like a bribe. So you have to put the money in an envelope now, because that's fine.
Yeah.
Because
no one's ever
no movies have ever contained people meeting and then slipping secret envelopes to each other with bribes in them. Maybe like, you know, they should have just made a rule that was like, okay, you have to, like, if you're filing an inquiry, you have to meet in the parking garage after 9 p.m. and you have to like make sure the coast is clear, and then you have to like wear a trench coat and like have a manila folder and subtly slip it to an informant, and then we will evaluate your inquiry. They might as well have just said that.
Yeah.
Have they discovered like Venmo at this point?
They have now.
What?
Now it just gets charged onto your account, your federation account. Ding!
Whoa.
Japan, $200 or whatever it is now.
The world is moving so quickly.
I know.
It is
amazing.
passing me by. So anyway, an inquiry is filed. The judges watch this dismount like 789 times. He ultimately, Kohei gets the dismount back, so he gets credit for the dismount. That puts Japan, bumps them up from 4th to 2nd, Great Britain down from silver to bronze, and Ukraine, who thought they had the bronze medal sewn up, is now bumped off of the podium to 4th. And everyone's like, poor Ukraine. That's the real scandal here. Because being honest, like, if we're judging, like, should Kohei have gotten credit for this dismount? I don't know.
No. I mean, I think no, but I also didn't see it from the side. We didn't have a side angle where you could really see, was he vertical or not? Did he pass through vertical or not? From the angle we saw it over and over, you couldn't tell. Like, I needed protractors and stuff. It was very close.
I mean, I'm going to say I didn't need protractors. I needed a knowledge of the men's pommel horse code of points. A level of knowledge I do not possess to feel like I can make a categorical statement about whether he should have received dismount credit. But I actually feel like that's true among people who do know also, that it's kind of like, well, he passed through a handstand, did he land? It's kind of, you know, I think there are arguments even from people who know what they're talking about when they talk about pommel horse.
Yeah. I don't know.
But from an aesthetic standpoint, I'm also going to say the argument maybe to do our favorite thing and kind of change the argument slightly.
Yes.
And add a different option is that the real problem was the execution score, which is not inquirable, but did not sufficiently reflect the fact that dismount should be like a fall of almost an execution deductions.
Messy. Yeah. It was.
Maybe that's the real villain is execution.
It was hangover walk of shame the day after with your heels in your hand, barefoot on the sidewalk. Messy. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, I do. I mean, the thing is, like, do you ever think the British at the time were not the team that they are? This made them the team. So I can see, like, it's very upsetting for Ukraine. But for the British, this was huge. Just with their home Olympics. Like, this is the Olympics where they became the British team, like an actual
they got
threat.
A team medal. So
right. It was
like, okay, I thought it was going to be silver, but I still, I have a medal and it's bronze.
Right.
Like, I thought I had a medal and now I am leaving with nothing.
There's that. Yes. So, and I think, we've covered the 2000s a lot, which are fun and very messy, but like that era has nothing on the 80s and 70s and 60s. Nothing. It's quaint and adorable.
Yeah.
That you could inquire about this thing. And then it was when every score was political and nonsense And how do you separate judging scandal from business as usual in those days? Like,
That's the thing, because I'm like,
Right.
okay, what's a scandal versus what's literally every score at this Olympics? But I
Right.
think that there's one that stands out for me in terms of like, this is the grandest controversy, but also I don't think it should have been.
Oh, okay. So the case of Bela's bullshit, the biggest one. Anyway, what's the team?
I mean, it's a tough category.
It is.
There's so many compelling nominees.
We should just do a whole episode on that. The T is the 1980 Olympic all-around final dispute victor.
Mhm.
That's what we're going to talk about.
So, it's the Moscow Olympics of 1980. No one could possibly imagine there being corruption in gymnastics at the 1980 Moscow Olympics. How dare you even suggest such a thing? Heading into the all-around final, and this was the era when your scores in the team competition, the compulsories and optionals, were carried over and had an influence in the result of the all-around final. So it wasn't just a one-day competition. Heading in the running, you had Maxi Gnauk in first place. You had Nadia, who is in the running, but fell on bars in the team optionals for 9.5, which was not shocking because, in terms of a perfect 9.5, like, she was getting 10s for that routine when she hit. So, like, all right, whatever.
Reigning Olympic champion, Nadia
Comaneci fell on bars. And the media coverage of this was very understanding and kind and circumspect. I'm just kidding. It was like, old crone of 18, Nadia Comaneci, falls on bars, is bad now. Subhead, she probably has a boyfriend or something. That was the general tenor of, Nadia has become bad because she's not obeying Bela Karolyi, and she might have a life, and she's as old as 18, so she might as well just dig a grave. That was generally the idea. That was the tenor of the media coverage after Nadia.
That was an actual headline, actually. Yeah,
in the team optionals. But that is why it was as close as it was, because if Nadia had hit that bars routine the way she normally did and got a 10 for it, she would have run away with a second consecutive Olympic all-around title. So it's kind of this idea of like, Nadia wasn't as good in 1980. I'm like, she kind of was, but she would also like fell once. That's like the thing. But she really was also very good in 1980. But so it was close between a lot of people. Most of the Soviets were in the running at this point, but like Nelly Kim fell on floor and they had some things. Davidova had a really good all-around competition, so she jumped up. But in the final beam routine, Nadia needed 9.95 for that routine to go ahead of Davidova and win the Olympic all-around title for the second time. She does her routine. It's a good one. It's not a great one. Little balance check on the side aerial, step on the dismount. It takes a long time for the score to come. It's not coming, and it's not coming. And this, a little bit, was expected at these Olympics because they were having some score entry and computer problems on beam throughout the entire competition. It was taking like 3 and 5 minutes for every score to be entered into the system and come in throughout the competition. So now when it's like, oh my God, she's being iced by NBC, she had to wait 24 seconds for her routine. I'm like, go to the 1980 Olympics. Because it was like the computer crashed after every single routine. And it was
also, this is the days when a computer took up like a high-rise building. It's not like now where you carry one around in your pocket and you wear one on your wrist. No.
Oh my God. Nana Jessica, we walked uphill both ways in the snow.
I just would like to say it took a lot of power and a very large computer to do this. Also, this is the era of the actual telephones that you pick up that were yellow.
They had to be at least avocado in color.
Yes, avocado yellow, or it didn't work. Everybody knows that.
Yeah,
that's a business telephone when it's that color.
Yeah. So ultimately, the score comes in, and it's 9.85. which ties Nadia for second. It's not enough to overtake Davidova for the gold medal. One of the head judges, Maria Simeonescu of Romania, won't enter the score. and is arguing with the other judges. And we see that it's a great shot on camera of like Simeonescu and the other judges having like a full argument about this score and what it should be and whether, Nadia should win or not. The reports are that the competition was delayed like up to half an hour because of this and entering the score and the argument about it. Ultimately, my feeling on the matter is that it's kind of a non-controversy because like were all of these scores insane for all of the Soviets and the Romanians and the East Germans and the top athletes? Yes, you can argue so many of these and their accuracy. This specific score for this specific routine, having watched it in the context of 1980, is 985 a fair score for that beam routine? Yes, that is a very fair score for that beam routine.
There is an argument about this, that this was revenge on Bela for his behavior forever. That they were like, we don't want him to be successful. We don't care about the athletes. We don't want anyone Bela's associated. And of course, Nadia, we know now because the secret police documents had refused to be coached by Bela and Marta Karolyi after she won the Olympics in Montreal. But, he was so despised. And then, of course, he poofed to the United States shortly after this. So, but the thing I don't understand about that argument is, why would you not want the glory of medals for your country for this at the expense of one coach? Is that worth it? Just punish him by, letting the public know about all the blackmail material have on him. Because they did have tons of blackmail material on him and Marta. Anyway.
That would assume that you view the gymnasts as people, which we know in 1980 they were not.
No. You just sent them, when they got their period, you sent them out back to dig their own grave. Yeah. Okay, so anything else about the Moscow Olympics?
Well, I'm very interested in kind of how the story of these scandals gets facilitated and gets then almost created. Because for me, this is one of those where it's kind of a non-controversy. Like, this is the score that came up is kind of like, yeah, ultimately, I think they got to the right place with the right score. But then the way things are talked about, the way they're covered, I was going back and reading the New York Times article about this competition at the day after this competition of their coverage. And I was just like, oh, this is how scandals start.
Right. And like, this is the thing. This is why like accurate gymnastics journalism is really important. And like, even now, like we catch mistakes all the time in very important like papers of record. And the thing is, you can go back and fix it now. It's not like the old days where it was literally printed and then you'd have to wait for a retraction the next day. But yeah, the article in the New York Times, which if you're a visual listener, we have up, the New York Times article says Nadia performed every move without apparent flaw, but that's not correct. Spencer, what are they missing?
Yeah, like I said, there is, she has a wobble on her aerial. But, most significantly, a major step on dismount, because that's something that even like a regular type sports reporter would be able to see and know. Like, I know this is not like a gymnastics expert who's writing this article and covering this, and I'm not expecting that. So like, a balance check on a side aerial, if you're not recognizing that that's a deduction, fine. You can see a step. So if you anyone who watched this routine from a place of, lack of bias, would at least be able to see, oh, she took an obvious step on the dismount. This is not a 10. So that's kind of the first thing where it's like, oh, this is how then stories get facilitated. Because if you didn't have YouTube, if you're in an area where you couldn't search YouTube for Nadia 1980 or 1980 all-around final, like I did, to watch this routine, then you're going on, oh, what did the New York Times write about what happened in this competition? And you're like, oh, Nadia's routine was perfect, and the communists didn't want her to win. They wanted the Soviet to win. So they fixed the competition, and they only gave her a 985, even though she should have gotten a 10, because the article says her routine was perfect.
Yep. And I mean, this is the other thing, like, even if the journalists at the time writing this would ask like experts in the field about it, like whoever their contacts are.
You mean do the work of journalism? That sounds like a lot. That's why I don't do it, because it sounds tiring and I don't want to talk to anyone.
That's why you send me to all the meets.
Yeah.
Yeah. This, I mean, if you talk to, the Romanians, they were going to give you one story. If you talk to, it totally depended on how you talk to it, what the story you got, but you would have to judge it for yourself. And this is what is really hard for people that are not gymnastics people. This goes back, regular gymnastics journalists, but this goes back to like reporting that Nadia's routine when she got the first 10 ever, well, in women's gymnastics, because of course it's not the perfect 10 ever. There was a man who got a 10 first in the rope climbing days, but it goes back to her routine wasn't perfect. She had a hop and she still got a 10. And she talks about that, but that's never reported that way. It's not the way the legend is told. And so this is why our work is so important, Spencer.
I do enjoy that this article also includes the claim that the judges' scores were actually 2 10s and 2 9 9s. So her score should have been a 995. But that comes from Bela.
Oh.
So, we have an unreliable narrator situation at the very least.
Unreliable. That's for one thing. I mean, this is because I'm sure that the journalists weren't given access to the actual computer tower to get their own.
Yeah.
But I mean, Uncle Tim has also covered in many, the whole Mexico City thing, which we're going to talk about. The scores were printed wrong. So let's get into this. So the next scandal. The case of the convenient communist. What's the T? It's 1968, Mexico City Olympics. Caslavska versus Petrik. Can you believe it's been a whole 2 years since we talked about Caslavska?
No, I can't. Because
it hasn't been. We talk about her every 5 minutes. How dare you? And it's Caslavska.
We retold this story. I think it's been maybe 2 years since we retold the story of the 1968 Olympics and Vera Caslavska, and being ultimately thinking she had the gold medal alone, ultimately tying with Larissa Petrik, and her silent protest of Soviet incursion in Czechoslovakia during the anthem, Jessica's favorite Olympic gymnastics story of all time.
Turned her head down and to the side, which I have used in my own life for specific protests, and I respect her so much. It's like kneeling. You get to, it's not a huge thing, but it's like a small gesture, just enough. And although kneeling is out of respect, so it is very different. This was specifically no respect to the Soviet flag because, of course, they had just invaded her country. But carry on, Spencer.
And the story has been for many years that the communists cheated, basically.
Right.
That Caslavska was the correct winner. They didn't like that, so they intervened and changed the score for Larissa Petrik so that a Soviet gymnast would have a gold medal. The reality is, as uncovered by Dr. Uncle Tim at gymnastics-history.com.
One of his many, many, many uncoverings.
That, in fact, the culprit was printing something wrong, which is also the ultimate culprit, we believe, of the 2000 Sydney vault problem, things being printed wrong. That the score was never actually changed, but they circulated the incorrect scores before the final. Those were misprinted so that, and this is once again, the days when scores carried over. So it mattered what you did before the final, that they were misprinted. And in reality, Petrik and Caslavska were tied going in. They got the same score in the final, so that they should have received the same score and were tied. So that when the scores were changed, that was the rectification of a previous error rather than the infusion of corruption into the competition. So again, a scandal that was one of our favorites that then stupid reality had to intervene and be like, actually, this maybe wasn't a judging scandal at least in the way that we think it was. This was a mistake of an administrative error, which I feel like so many things through gymnastics just turn out to be like an administrative error.
Sydney vault final, vault, the all-around final, the vault, administrative error. Yeah, everyone did their job. It was administrative error.
That should be the logo of the FIG. It shouldn't be like Federation Gymnastics. It should be like FIG, administrative error. It's just default to administrative error.
Oh my god. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing why it takes sometimes, because you have to think, like, what is the motivation of all of these of these newspapers that covered things for so long to go back, revisit these stories, do something about them? Like, what is that motivation to actually do a deep dive? And like, so many newspapers are just struggling to stay afloat right now. And so you need someone who's obsessed with gymnastics, who got a PhD from a major Ivy League university in history. It's Ivy League on the West Coast. I mean, there isn't an Ivy League.
I was going to say,
there should be an Ivy. There should be an Ivy League on the West Coast, but there aren't any because the Ivy League would never allow that. So, but basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what's better than that? It's in, like, what's the triangle of people who have won, what's the big award that, like, Sweden gives for, like, peace and science? Nobel Peace. Yeah, it's like the Nobel Prize Triangle something in the Bay Area.
I believe that's the Nobel Prize is awarded in Oslo, Norway. And so if you say Sweden, I feel like I'm just intercepting some Scandinavian hate mail. Because if there's one thing I know about Swedes, it's that they do not want to be mistaken for Norwegians and vice versa.
Oh, and don't mistake the Viking countries for the not Viking, but the Nordic area ones. Don't send us an email. We already got that. Send your emails to Michaela Skinner at skinner.com. The other thing is that we have a fact checker on the show. So, fact checker, could you please correct us about who gives out the Nobel Peace Prize? What country is responsible for that right now? Anyway, the point is that you need a gymnastics fan to grow up and get a PhD in history from a major university that's respected around the world, and then work on this on his own time for fun because he loves gymnastics, and look into these things and fix the history. Because of course we all looked, we all learned our gymnastics history from Gymnastics Greatest Stars, which is still my favorite,
the greatest movie.
The greatest movie ever made.
Like an AFI list of greatest movies. We all agree with this.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there's so many times when we are now learning that the lure of the communists did a bad is so strong in the United States during certain eras that it obscures the reality of reporting, which is not to say that there wasn't a lot of Soviet corruption in gymnastics, because there super was.
There totally was.
But sometimes it was just an administrative error.
Yeah. But I'm sure we will, when people look back, they will have seen that after 9/11 towards anything coming from the Arab world, and not to mention everything that's happening now. So I would like to issue my official apology to the Norwegian government and its people. The Nobel Peace Prize is issued by the Norwegian Parliament, and I will forever remember that it is the Norwegians, not the Swedes. How dare I? Norway, oft overlooked. We have a new Olympics coming up, which I will be traveling to, so I can give you the actual, I will be sitting there watching everything. So I can give you I was there, watched it happen, reports from podium training through the entire games. We will be able to give you the real eyes-on reports from Paris. But since we have a new Olympics coming up, we have to tell you about the updated rules, because the FIG does not and if you're new here, the FIG is the International Gymnastics Federation. Some people call it the FIG, some people call it FIG. And they like to change the rules constantly. It's a moving target. And now we have updated rules for this Olympics, which some of them are great. So let's go into what's different in Paris versus Tokyo.
If you're, just here for the rings, just here for the Olympics, we totally understand. So here's what's kind of changed, besides the fact that there will be people there again, which I think is a not insignificant change from the Tokyo Olympics, that there will be, people in the stands, etc. Biggest change from the Tokyo Olympics is the format and size of the teams. So for the Paris Olympics, we are back to 5-member teams. In Tokyo, we had 4-member teams with the possibility for additional individual qualifiers from those nations who competed at the Olympics but were not eligible for the team medal or to compete in the team final for those countries. Now, 5-member teams for the countries that qualified teams, individuals for the countries who didn't qualify teams, but if you qualified a team, 5 members on the team, they can all compete in the team competition, and that's it. It is a 5-4-3. We're back to a 5-4-3 format. Would you like to tell the people what a 5-4-3 format means, or would you like me to do it because you're worried about the numbers? Either way is fine.
It means you have 5 people on a team. So 5 people march out on the floor. Only 4 can compete. You can change the makeup of the 4 on each event. You can use a different 4 on each event, but only 4 are allowed to compete on each event. You can't compete 5 people on each event. And then only 3 scores count. And in the final, this is a qualification. In the final, it's only 3 people up. All 3 scores count. You can't throw anything out. In qualifications, you can throw 1 person out and one score. So you will have the same final scores, the same, how do I want to say that?
The same number of scores will count in qualification and the team final. Yes.
Yes.
So yes, what you're saying, you can compare and contrast your score from qualification for the team final because 3 scores count in each. Does this change the competition in any way? Is there anyone who benefits from a 5-member team versus 4-member teams where everyone does the all-around in qualification? Or is it just like,
It's the countries who have all 5 people on the team. The bummer is that not everyone can do all around. So you're going to have people that can't compete all around. So you have to decide who your all rounders are going to be. And then that means they're the only ones that can even try to qualify to the all around final. So like, how do you think it's going to be for the US?
Right. So there is a 2 per country rule. So only 2 people can qualify from a country for any given final. And you have not everyone's going to do the all-around in qualification. So, for example, as we see the U.S. team now, and obviously things can change, people get injured, things happen, Jade Carey, for example, likely would not have an opportunity to qualify for the all-around final this year, because if you're putting together the lineups for the U.S. right now in qualification, you wouldn't have Jade up on bars because everyone else on the team is significantly stronger, I would say, than her on bars. So that's where you would look at right now. She wouldn't compete the all-around in qualification. So in Tokyo, Jade was able to compete in the all-around final as the replacement for Simone Biles after she withdrew, because Jade had competed the all-around in qualification competing as an individual. She was eligible to get into the final. This year, likely she's not even going to compete the all-around in qualification, so wouldn't be eligible to repeat that feat of qualifying and competing in an Olympic all-around final. So for individual athletes like specialists on teams, there is a significant change in their eligibility of what finals they could maybe qualify to. In general, I would say team-wise, like the bigger teams in bigger country, like a bigger team size benefits the bigger teams, the bigger deeper countries. Yep. The deeper teams, the more gymnasts you have. The countries that actually have a specialist who like, oh, we have another specialist we can throw in and you can have a good score on this event, but you would never have been on a 4-member team. Like potentially the U.S. men with Steven Nedorosik, although that's its own argument about whether that's advisable, and we won't know until the Olympics happen. But it definitely is. In general, if you want to create a system where it's more up in the air about who can win, you want smaller teams where all the scores count, because then a country with like maybe 2 amazing gymnasts and not really the depth can be right up there.
Yep.
But if you have 5 gymnasts, or like the format I would prefer where you have 7 gymnasts on a team like the 96 Olympics, it definitely benefits those deeper countries.
The best Olympics. I have so many athletes on every team. The other biggest change at these games in Paris is no Russians at all, which means that there will be no defending Olympic team on either side, women's or men's. Nobody's there.
The Russian Olympic Committee apparently won, because that was super different than the Russians.
Yeah, it's
the Russian Olympic Committee won team gold for both the men and the women. In Tokyo, they will not be there, which is kind of opens up some opportunities for some other countries.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say that like means in terms of other countries? Like, what's your take on like who benefits the most from that?
the U.S. men might actually be able to win a medal, a team medal.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's the hugest, most amazing thing. It's still going to be hard for them to win, but it's a possibility that they could.
Oh yeah, I would say
win
they
bronze.
should still be considered the favorites for bronze. Whereas if the Russians were there, it's like Russia, China,
You're
Japan
done.
would have been heavy 3 medal favorites.
Yeah. And it is interesting because so many teams are depleted, as teams always are at this time of year, because every country has had injuries. So I don't think there's any of the top countries who really have everybody that they necessarily wanted. But I think I think there's only one or two, or only two people different from the world team that won a medal last year for the men. So they have their same squad. Also, the women are definitely outright favorites for gold, the US women. Like without Russia there and with Simone competing, they're I mean, even with Andrade having her triple twisting Yurchenko, and if she does her Chung with the other twist, with the extra twist too, then there's still a significant D score advantage for that team.
In terms of competitors, I think one of the really interesting things I've seen looking at the teams and who the favorites are and starting to kind of piece that together is on the women's side, how remarkably similar the list of favorites is to Tokyo. You just take out the Russians and gymnasts who have retired, like Murakami, and then you're like, oh, it's the same group, which is very rare. Still rare in women's gymnastics, but much more common now and changing with increased longevity of careers. That, last Olympics, if you said, who are the 3 medal favorites for the women's vault final heading into the competition, we would have said Simone Biles, Jade Carey, Rebeca, Andrade. Now, as it happened, Simone got the twisties, Jade tripped in the event final, so things don't always play out that way. But heading into the Olympics, you would have said those 3 are the favorite. Heading into this Olympics, those 3 are the favorites. It's the same group, which is pretty unusual. We usually have more of a turnover in terms of who the favorites are. But there's one event where we do have the most significant turnover in terms of new favorites, and that would be on uneven bars.
Yep.
So we have Chu Chi-Yun of China, who has an amazing difficulty, amazing D-score, amazing execution, and won the world title. And we have Kélia Namour of Algeria, who is, connecting things that we never thought would be all connected together, and it's all connected. The whole gang, they're all just a chain, like kindergartners going to the Natural History Museum. She ties everyone together in that routine so they don't get lost, and it's pretty remarkable. And they are setting the standard on bars ahead of the rest of the world, 2 gymnasts who we didn't have eligible at the last Olympics. So I think that's the one that has the biggest change.
Yep. I also know, there's also going to be openings in the bar final now, because with Shilese out, she has been a bars medalist the last 2 worlds. That is going to be, there's now, bars is really hard and you never know what's going to happen with bars,
still
because
super deep. Because
it's so deep, but it's one less. Well, yeah.
Shilese is out, but Suni's like, you know what? I'm in. And defending champion Nina Derwell, have you seen her most recent routine? Because she was like, guess what? I'm in.
I'm back. Yep.
I'm back and I'm in.
She's definitely going to make the final. And yeah, I mean, it could be the same lineup as the last Olympics. Who's not in?
Minus Ilyan, minus Russians.
Right.
Got a lot of the same favorites.
Yeah. Bars is what I'm most excited. Most excited to see. The biggest change in terms of the importance of event finals and what happened to Jade Carey, especially at event finals, which is she was the favorite to win, or at least medal, made the Olympics on vault, not to win, but to medal, because Andrade is there, Simone was there.
Simone, I think
with Simone out.
With Simone out, I think we could go back in what we were saying. Who could possibly remember? But Andrade wasn't quite as oh my God, her Chung is so much better than everyone else's. How could you even imagine that she could possibly not win? But I think it was probably back and forth.
Also because Jade had gone to like all the World Cups and just blown everybody away at all those World Cups. And that's how she won her spot to the Olympics, is through the World Cups. And that system doesn't exist anymore. So there's none of those specialists that can on the teams. There's no country that has a team can also have event specialist qualifiers. So she tripped, like Spencer said, in the vault final, and she was one of the favorites to medal, if not win gold, tripped and, was out of the medals. And so I think the one thing that's super exciting that they've changed is now there is a touch warm-up for event finals, just like there was for team. Like, you don't warm up in the back and then come right out and vault. Now you'll actually have a touch warm-up. So that is so much better, so much safer, because the lighting is different. The touch of the equipment is, the feel of things is different than the warm-up gym. Like, you want to have that opportunity to warm up just for safety. So that's another big change.
My question is, how do you, if you are Jade Carey, because I'm thinking of my stupid brain, I'm like, if you make the vault final, how are you just not standing there at the end of the runway like, don't trip, don't trip, don't trip, don't trip? Because that's like all I would possibly be able to think about. I'd be like, remember that time you tripped in Tokyo? Don't trip. And then I would forget how to run and just like run diagonally right onto the judges table and be like, I can't do it. I can't. I forgot how to run. I was too nervous and I just need to go sit here on the judges table.
Run diagonally onto the judges. This is what we haven't seen. People have fallen.
It's called mental toughness. That's what, because it's not going to happen, because it's called like athletes and mental toughness, which I do not have.
People have fallen onto the judges table many times, but we've never seen someone just run across it. Just like,
if I were there, right? You would have.
But they're up higher now, so that would be a whole leap into the stands, basically, to run across it. But I believe you could do it, Spencer. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do wonder if Jade has a specific strategy she's used. Like Suni has talked about her therapist she works with. Simone talks all the time about, I don't miss my therapy appointment, which is because she wants to miss it. Like, you don't always want to go to your therapy appointment, so you say it out loud for accountability to the whole world. I never miss my therapy appointment. Yeah. And then there's the millions of vault she's done. But yeah, jumping into the stands. I mean, this is something we can expect in the gala. Are they doing the gala again?
I don't think they do that anymore, right?
I don't think they do either. I don't know. Maybe they're going to bring it back again.
I mean, if anyone could bring it back effectively, it would be France.
Yeah.
Because like the French athletes would actually do it right.
Right. And the French World Cup the Paris World Cup is so good and so theatrical. It is like the closest meet, I think, to an NCAA gymnastics meet in the US in terms of theatrics that there is. The Olympics are not, but that is. So, all right. Some Gymternet news. We talked about Michaela Skinner in our behind the scenes on Friday. She said unkind things. I'm just summarizing about the current team, and some of which were definitely racist in nature. Whether she knows it or not is not the issue, because this has been an ongoing issue with her since she was a teenager. And she has issued a written apology after her video that she made about the team went everywhere, and it was picked up on all the major, I don't know, what do you call People magazine? Major.
What do you call People magazine? I think it's called People magazine.
Like entertainment.
You mean it was picked up in dentist's office everywhere?
And E! Online. Celebrity news. Yes, and the celebrity news. So if you want to hear our takes on it, it's on, we talked about it behind the scenes, but I just think like this is why in life it is important to suffer, because you learn from those things. When people are upset with you for a reason, you can learn from them, and then things you can look into, and you can be like, I didn't know this, if that's the case, which I don't think so. This has been going on since she was a teenager, but consequences are important, and they're an opportunity for you. And I also think the reason that we're not totally going into this right now, super in depth, is like, the athletes who earn their way to the Olympics deserve the attention, not Michaela Skinner. So that's why we're not going into it. We're not going to spend a really long time on it. And, not unexpected. What was unexpected, Elvira Saadi.
Was that unexpected?
That the ban was upheld? That
yes,
was
that's the news,
unexpected.
that Elvira Saadi's lifetime ban was upheld
Yep.
on appeal.
So a Canadian Soviet Olympic champion, and then Canadian and Soviet coach for many, many years, coached many of the best gymnasts, and that she's just the most severe ban with a non-criminal case from a coach in Canada. And she appealed it, but it has been upheld. So she cannot coach ever again. Period. End of story. She can in 10 years help other coaches teach other coaches, which is the problem we discussed with how this decision was rendered, but she cannot ever coach again for her entire life. Livvy Dunne, the elite gymnast who people didn't even know was a gymnast, and she had a wild TikTok following, and then she started college and it's even bigger. She has decided she is returning to LSU for another year, and I think this is so smart because she doesn't need this platform, but it will definitely not hurt. It's really smart for whatever LSU is paying her to stay. That's the real deal, which I'm just assuming they would make her a really good deal to stay. So, yeah, which is like, yeah.
I mean, they're not dumb.
No.
It's
like,
better for the team if she's there.
When they won
and
the
I'm
national
hoping that she can have another like healthier season, get some competition time. Her gymnastics is so lovely and it's such a joy to watch. And it's my frustration that part doesn't get talked about enough with Livvy Dunne. Like, her execution is exceptional. Her gymnastics is exceptional. She's worked exceptionally hard throughout her years as a junior elite who was right on track and scoring with SUNY when they were juniors.
Yes.
And that is also, it's just a joy to watch her in competition.
Yes. And I feel like this is like the really good thing about LSU is like when they won, they went straight to the legislature and thanked the legislature for passing the laws that would help them have the first NIL. And what am I going to call it? Not purchase team, NIL possible team lineup that helped them win. Enhanced
the NIL super team, the
NIL super team, which is like fine. I have no problem with it, and good for thanking the legislature for those laws. But also, yeah, Livvy Dunne is amazing, and they're so lucky to have her because she's fantastic, and she's the loveliest person, and I'm very happy that she is going to have another year there. And hopefully we'll get to see her more. We got to see more of her floor this year, which I love the little back spring thing she does. So it's like the back spring and then she pops back up. I love that. It's my favorite part of her routine. Gym nerd announcements. So this is the last week. You can watch a live replay of the live show. Some people from the audience popped up, like Kensley came and talked to us about what someone asked what our process for doing the show is. And I described my process, and then Kensley described how you and Kensley would try to decipher my text messages that were backwards and sideways. Yeah. And yeah, that continues. Christy Phillips also came up on stage and told a crazy story that still makes me giggle when I think about it. The Balance, Amy Borman and Fact Checker's book was just announced, so you can order it now. Amy coached Simone for a long time, since she was her first days in gymnastics. She was her very first coach, and to 15 world and Olympic medals through her all-around gold at the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. And the book's called The Balance, My Years Coaching Simone Biles. So check it out. Link in the show notes. New members behind the scenes is on Friday at noon Pacific, and you can listen to our discussion from last week now if you'd like to. And coming up, we have fantasy game for Paris. We have a new international power ranking, and we will have Paris live show tickets available soon. It's a virtual live show that we're doing from the Paris Olympics on August 2nd, Trampoline Day. And I will be in Paris reporting live. So if you want to know specific things about what happened in the arena that you could not see on TV, for example, or you want to know about it before the evening primetime broadcast comes out, I am here for you. So remember, you can still buy the live show tickets this week and watch the replay. And please subscribe and review us, and make sure to automatically download on whatever podcast player you use. And we will see you this Friday for all the behind the scenes. Friday at noon Pacific is when we do that. And you can join us live, or we answer questions that you submit ahead of time. Till Friday at noon Pacific for behind the scenes. Remember to take off a gay, split on rights, and thanks for listening.